May 11, 1944, occupied France. Altitude, 18,000 feet. The air over the Pas de Calais was not air, but a thick, lethal slurry of ice, burnt cordite and fear. Below, the ancient earth of Normandy, soon to be baptized in blood, slept under the steel rule of the Third Reich. Above it, the roar of 4 Merlin engines, the deep, resonant thunder of a heavy bomber, the Avro Lancaster, was an industrial defiance hurled at the darkness. Inside, Pilot Officer Elias Graham, a 20-year-old navigator who had aged a decade in 6 months, was hunched over his charts, the chilling metallic smell of the oxygen mask his only comfort. This was the 32nd mission. For Bomber Command, the numbers were a cold, brutal statistic. The odds of completing an entire tour, 30 operations, were less than 1 in 4. Men were chewed up by the attrition engine of the night war, their survival less a testament to skill and more a throw of the dice against the German air defenses. Tonight, the dice rolled badly. The target was a crucial railway marshalling yard near Lille. They had finished their run, released their payload, and the colossal, lumbering aircraft had shuddered in relief. But the German response was instantaneous, a masterwork of tactical coordination known as the Kammhuber Line. The flak was heavy, the shells bursting in jagged violet clouds that seemed to reach out and claw at the bomber's metallic skin. Then came the Nachtjäger. The night fighter, a twin-engined Messerschmitt Bf-110, was piloted by an unseen hunter whose name, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, meant nothing to Graham but whose arrival meant everything. Richter approached from below, exploiting the bomber's blind spot, using the newly refined Schrager music, oblique upward-firing cannons, a deadly technological surprise the Allied crews had not yet fully understood. The sound was not an explosion. It was a catastrophic tear, a sound of industrial metal screaming its death throes. The Lancaster's starboard inner engine instantly vanished in a sheet of flame. The intercom crackled with Flight Sergeant Davies' urgent, clipped voice. "Feathering! Losing hydraulics, bail out! Bail out, for God's sake, bail out!" The irony of the air war was immense. These crews, flying the most complex machines of their age, were now reduced to the desperate simplicity of a silk canopy and a prayer. Elias Graham wrestled with his hatch, the gale force wind tearing at his gloves, the icy air burning his lungs. He felt the terrifying, nauseating lurch of the aircraft as Davies fought to keep it level long enough for the crew to escape. He tumbled out, the shock of the slipstream hitting him like a physical blow. The darkness swallowed him whole. 1 second he was part of a technological marvel. The next, he was a lonely scrap of humanity falling toward an occupied continent. The parachute opened with a violent jolt, silence slamming down as suddenly as the chaos had erupted. The only sound now was the ragged thump of his own heart. He looked up, but the bomber was gone, only a slow, smouldering ember marking its final descent miles away. He landed hard in a damp, muddy field, the silk canopy collapsing around him like a shroud. The first rule of evasion, drilled into every airman by Mi-9, was primal. Get rid of the chute, burn it, bury it, hide it. It was a beacon that might as well have a swastika printed on it. He fumbled with the clasp, tearing free, the adrenaline a painful, buzzing energy in his veins. He scrambled for the small waterproof escape kit, the tiny compass, the silk map, the few francs. He was in open country. The enemy was everywhere. Every shadow was a patrol, every distant sound a truck engine. It was hours later, deep in the pre-dawn gloom, shivering under the inadequate cover of a small copse, that he heard the other sound, a hushed cough. He froze, his hand instinctively gripping the tiny, useless clasp knife in his pocket. A shadow moved near a line of ancient, gnarled trees. It wasn't the square military silhouette of a German sentry. It was Davies, the flight engineer, miraculously safe, though limping badly, his face streaked with soot and blood. "Elias, thank God. Thought I was the only one. We've got to move, Davies, now." They moved westward, away from the distant glow of the wreckage, their boots sinking into the wet soil of a small, forgotten farm lane. The sun began to paint the sky in weak, sickly pinks. They were exposed. They were wearing RAF uniform, a death sentence if caught outside the Geneva Convention's protection. The path led them, by sheer terrifying chance, to a small, isolated stone farmhouse. the kind that looked as if it had stood for 500 years, impervious to the wars of men. Fear fought with exhaustion. To approach was to risk collaboration. To stay was to guarantee capture. A figure emerged from the morning mist, tending to a small vegetable patch. She was a woman in her late 50s, dressed simply, her face etched with a lifetime of sun and hard labor. But her eyes were sharp, betraying a knowledge that went deeper than the soil. Graham spoke the single coded word, taught to him back in England, a phrase designed to test the loyalty of a stranger, a linguistic lifeline thrown across enemy lines. Bonjour, nous sommes Canadiens. The lie was flimsy, but the intent was clear. The woman, Edith Marceau, paused. She did not look at the two mud-caked, terrified airmen. Her gaze remained fixed on the damp earth. The risk she was about to take, the cost of which was not merely her life, but the lives of her family, was unimaginable. The Nazi threat for sheltering an evader was explicit: death by firing squad. She had seconds to weigh the fate of two strangers against her own existence. Edith finally looked up, her expression completely neutral, masking a terror that was already turning to resolve. She did not whisper. She did not panic. She spoke in a low, firm voice, giving an instruction that was less an invitation and more a command of the resistance, an echo of a hidden tactical war being fought in cellars and haylofts. The Germans patrol the road at 7 o'clock precisely. You have exactly 20 minutes. Follow me. Do not speak. Do not make a sound. She turned not toward the front door, but toward the ancient stone barn, moving with the practiced swiftness of a seasoned operative. The technology of their survival was now reduced to silence, darkness, and the sheer, desperate geometry of a hiding place. She led them through a passage hidden behind stacked bales of hay, down a rough-hewn stone staircase, into the cold, still air of a root cellar. The door closed above them, plunging them into absolute, suffocating darkness. They were safe for now, but they were trapped in the heart of the enemy, and the immediate physical threat of the Gestapo was about to be replaced by a deeper, strategic puzzle. What the two airmen, sheltered by this one courageous civilian, did not know was that the risk Edith Marceau took was not just an act of kindness, but a calculated move in a secret war far larger than their own escape. Her connections ran deeper than a simple farmstead. They reached into the highest echelons of the resistance, into the very structure of the occupation itself. The story of Elias Graham and Flight Sergeant Davies had only just begun. It was a story of a stunning, nearly forgotten tactical operation, a hidden chapter of the war where the courage of a single French civilian was about to unlock a strategic weapon. This story is a deep dive into the human element of WE2, where technology meets raw courage. To continue this journey into the secret war of the French resistance and discover the shocking twist behind Edith's actions, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for the next chapters. Your support helps us uncover these vital stories. The root cellar was a tomb of damp earth and silence. For Pilot Officer Graham and Flight Sergeant Davies, the hours stretched into an agonizing eternity, punctuated only by the distant, heavy clatter of a German truck passing on the road above. Each rumbling sound was a chilling reminder that their lives rested on the fragile integrity of a stone wall and the silence of a French woman they barely knew. The immediate relief of sanctuary had quickly curdled into acute stress. This was the psychological warfare of evasion, the inability to act, the reliance on others, the constant terror of detection. Davies, the older and more pragmatic of the two, leaned against a wooden crate, his breathing shallow. "She's risking everything, Elias. For two blokes she's never seen." Graham, the navigator, focused on detail, the technical mind unable to shut down. "Look at the way she moved. Too practiced. She wasn't scared of us. She was scared of being slow." What they sensed intuitively was true. Edith Marceau was no naive farmhand acting on a whim of charity. She was a crucial cog in the PAT line, one of the most resilient and professional evasion networks operating in northern France. These networks, funded and guided by the British Special Operations Executive, SOE and MI9, were the unseen infrastructure of the air war. They were a strategic asset. Every rescued airman was another highly trained crew member returned to the fight, a denial of resources to the enemy. The network itself was a masterpiece of operational security, built on layers of trust and code. It operated with the precision of a fine Swiss clock, running on the courage of couriers, safe housekeepers, and counterfeiters. The irony here was profound. The survival of the crews who mastered the cutting-edge technology of the Avro Lancaster now depended on bicycles, whispered passwords, and the ability to forge an identity card using wartime paper and glue, the simplest tools imaginable. Later that afternoon, a faint scratching sound brought both airmen instantly awake. The trap door above them creaked open, revealing the stoic face of Edith Marceau, backlit by the afternoon sun. She held a basket containing stale bread, cheese, and a bottle of thin wine. But what she delivered with the rations was far more important: information. She spoke in hushed, perfect English, a skill she acquired from years working in Paris before the occupation, a detail that immediately elevated her in their perception from peasant to operative. You are safe, but the wreckage of your aircraft, it is being guarded closely. The Gestapo are looking for 2 missing airmen. They know there were survivors. The technological angle of the disaster was being weaponized by the enemy. When a bomber went down, the Germans didn't just capture the crew, they swarmed the site, analyzing every fragment. They sought intelligence on new radar equipment, bomb sites, and identification papers. Graham and Davies were not just men, they were walking intelligence troves, and the Reich would use every resource to capture them. Edith produced a small, rolled-up, tightly compressed object, a map, not of silk but of thin paper, heavily marked in pencil. This is the route. You are near the village of Vaucresson. Tonight you move to the next safe house. The courier will meet you at the old bridge at midnight. His name is Jean. The password is, "The swallows fly in April." The response is, "But the winter was long." This moment, the handing over of the map, was the physical commitment to the path of the resistance. It was the transition from passive evaders to active participants in the Shadow War. It demanded not only courage, but a level of tactical discipline they had previously reserved only for the cockpit. As she prepared to leave, Davies asked the question that had been hanging in the humid air of the cellar. "Madame Marceau, why are you doing this?" "The risk." Edith paused, her expression hardening. She looked down at the 2 airmen, symbols of the distant Allied power that promised liberation. "I do it because my son is a prisoner of war, and because the air smells different when the boots of the Fritz are on your streets. You fought for our sky, now we fight for your life." Her words were a stark emotional anchor for their situation, highlighting the shared human cost of the conflict. The war was not just tanks and planes, it was the quiet, terrifying determination of millions of occupied civilians. That evening, as darkness fell, a darkness that was both a cloak of safety and a blanket of fear, Edith led them out. The airmen's escape was a masterpiece of low-tech stealth, moving through fields, using hedgerows as cover, their only tools, their physical fitness, and the darkness. They reached the ancient, moss-covered stone bridge precisely at midnight. A moment of pure, raw suspense followed. Was the courier real? Was this a trap set by the Gestapo using a captured resistance member? The silence was total, broken only by the gentle trickle of the stream below. Then a figure materialized from the shadows, not the older man they had perhaps expected, but a boy, no older than 15, riding a decrepit bicycle. The boy, Jean, slid off the bike, his young face showing a composure far beyond his years. Graham spoke the code. "The swallows fly in April." John looked them over, his eyes sharp and assessing. But the winter was long. The tension broke. They were back in the network's current. Jean produced 2 forged identity cards, crude but perhaps sufficient under poor light, identifying them as Belgian laborers seeking work in Vichy, France. This small piece of paper technology, the counterfeit ID, was the second key to their survival. They followed Jean, heading deeper into the labyrinth of the occupied countryside, heading toward the coast. They had survived the flak, the crash, and the initial hunt. But the real twist, the stunning order that would change the trajectory of their evasion, was waiting not at the next safe house, but in the most unlikely place imaginable, a high-security German communication center miles away, where the details of their rescue were being carefully logged, not by the Gestapo but by a completely different branch of the resistance. The game had just become significantly more complex, moving from simple evasion to something far more dangerous. Jean led the airmen through the twisting back alleys of Vaucresson, a village barely visible on most tactical maps, but strategically located near a key German installation. The next safe house was not a barn, but the hidden attic above a small, unassuming cafe, a hub of forced sociality in occupied territory. The irony was palpable. They were safer hiding in plain sight, above a place where German officers regularly drank, than they would be in the remote countryside. The sheer audacity of the resistance was often its best camouflage. Inside the cafe's attic, the airmen met a new figure, Captain André Fournier. Fournier was older, his uniform a civilian tweed jacket, but his eyes held the intensity of a career military strategist. He was not just a resistance fighter, he was the head of a small hyper-secret cell, dedicated not to evasion, but to signals intelligence. Fournier brought a technical precision to their plight. Pilot Officer Graham, Flight Sergeant Davies, you are extremely valuable, not just alive but because of what you know and what you don't know. He explained the complex reality of their situation. The Germans had indeed tracked their escape and were actively hunting them. But Fournier's group had a mole inside a local German Signals Corps office, a critical node in the communication matrix linking the Luftwaffe, the Wehrmacht, and the Gestapo. This mole, codenamed Cobra, was listening to more than just German troop movements. Cobra was intercepting and decrypting low-level messages related to downed airmen. Fournier pulled out a small, meticulously drawn sketch, a detailed layout of a German coastal defense battery. This was where the technological war met human strategy. The Germans have been shifting the frequency of their ground-based radar near Saint-Valery-en-Caux. This shift correlates perfectly with the increasing number of RAF bombers being intercepted on the return leg of their mission. He posited a thesis. The Germans were not simply moving their radar, they were testing a new, highly advanced ground radar unit, capable of tracking aircraft at lower altitudes than previously thought possible, specifically targeting aircraft damaged during a raid and trying to limp home. The air war is not static, Fournier stated. They are testing new technology every week. They have been conducting high-priority sweeps in your crash area, but their focus is not merely on 2 evaders, it is on a specific piece of your equipment. Graham instantly knew what he meant, the H-2S radar system. The H-2S was the revolutionary airborne ground mapping radar used by RAF bombers. It was a strategic asset, allowing crews to see cities through cloud cover. If the Germans captured a functioning component, they could develop countermeasures that would instantly blind Bomber Command. The 2 pilots suddenly shifted from being mere escapees to strategic assets. Their mission was no longer simply survival, but denial of intelligence. But the real twist lay in Fournier's intelligence reports. Cobra had intercepted a highly unusual transmission marked Top Priority Vaucresson Sector. The message detailed the movements of a high-ranking German officer, a Colonel Dieter Voss, who was en route to the region. Colonel Voss is not Gestapo. He is Wehrmacht Intelligence, Abwehr, Fournier explained. His specialization is recovering technology. He is a brilliant man, ruthless but with a unique reputation. He never chases common evaders. He only pursues targets with maximum strategic value. The intercepted message contained one cryptic phrase that made Fournier's blood run cold, a phrase apparently related to the captured remnants of the Lancaster. Ensure the package is secure. The return order is imminent. Package, Fournier elaborated, is their code word for a critical component or a captured officer, but the return order, that is what makes no sense. The return order is usually an Allied signal. It means extraction. This was the strategic enigma. Why would a German intelligence officer be moving toward an Allied return order? The answer lay in the technological espionage and counterintelligence that defined this phase of the war. Fournier believed that Colonel Voss was not just hunting them, but was setting a complex trap, possibly using a captured British radio transmitter to lure a rescue team into an ambush. The pilots were exhausted, but their minds raced. They had navigated a physical battlefield, and now they faced a psychological one. The simple escape had turned into a high-stakes counterintelligence mission. They were now the bait. Fournier, however, had a counterplan, a plan so audacious it seemed suicidal. He knew the airmen's escape route, leading south to the Pyrenees, was compromised. Their path to survival had to be perpendicular to the planned escape. "We cannot let Voss catch you, and we cannot let him set his trap," Fournier said, looking directly at Graham. "We are going to use the Germans' own obsession with technology against him. We are going to make him believe you are somewhere else entirely. We are going to lead him to a ghost." The technological chess match was set. The survival of two airmen depended on their ability to become a phantom, driven by the coded whispers of a secret agent hidden deep within the enemy's communication network. The path to safety now led not away from danger, but directly toward a calculated, controlled confrontation with the most formidable intelligence officer on the Western Front. The shift in mission was a profound psychological transformation for Graham and Davies. They were no longer victims fleeing a crash site. They were agents of deception. Captain Fournier's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity, relying on the Germans' unshakable faith in the precision of their own radio intelligence. Fournier's plan hinged on exploiting Colonel Voss's known weakness, his single-minded obsession with recovering the physical technology of the H-2S radar. "We have two objectives," Fournier outlined. 1. You escape. 2. We feed Voss a false trail that ensures he is geographically separated from your actual escape route long enough for us to extract you. The plan involved a sophisticated piece of counter-espionage, radio mimicry. Fournier's cell possessed a captured, highly miniaturized British radio transmitter, the same type used by downed airmen. The goal was to transmit a deliberately garbled low-power signal, known as a broken transmission, from a location far to the north, near the coast, mimicking a desperate airman trying to call for help. This technological lie required precise timing. The Germans' direction-finding technology, Funkpeilung, was highly effective, and a continuous signal would be located within hours. The transmission had to be brief, intermittent, and strategically misleading. Meanwhile, Graham and Davies' real route was not south toward Spain, but east toward Belgium, a route they would never have contemplated, as it led closer to the front lines in the German heartland. The creation of the Ghost was assigned to Jean, the young courier, a testament to the trust placed in the network's young operatives. Jean was tasked with carrying the transmitter, a technology vastly more dangerous than any weapon, to a derelict lighthouse near Dieppe. The danger was extreme. If Jean was caught with the radio, his fate would be swift and brutal. Yet the boy carried the burden of this technological gambit with a quiet, steely resolve. "The German radio direction finders are crude but fast," Fournier coached Jean. "They will triangulate the signal. If you transmit for more than 30 seconds, they will pinpoint the house. 10 seconds, Jean. That is all we need." The airmen watched, helpless, as the boy left. Their fate was now being decided by the technological dance between a child with a radio and the sophisticated German Funkpeilung network. For Graham and Davies, the next 48 hours were a blur of movement under the cover of night. They moved through ancient tunnels and forgotten canals, relying on Fournier's detailed knowledge of the local topography. They encountered a series of new, deeply committed civilians, a barge operator, a priest, and finally, a seemingly timid pharmacist who held the key to their final audacious move. This pharmacist, Monsieur Lefebvre, was the critical link to the astonishing twist. Lefebvre was a master counterfeiter, not of paper currency, but of official German documents and military supply requisitions, a strategic form of sabotage. Colonel Voss's detail is now moving toward the coast, chasing Jean's signal, Fournier confirmed via a covert message delivered by Lefebvre. The ghost worked. Voss believes the H-2S component is hidden near Dieppe. Now came the stunning order. Fournier's intelligence had evolved. The return order intercepted earlier was not a code for an ambush. It was the actual, genuine code for an Allied extraction planned for a different downed crew miles away. And Colonel Voss knew it. Voss's plan was complex. He wasn't going to ambush the extraction team. He was going to intercept the Allied communication regarding the extraction. He was playing a long game of strategic eavesdropping, hoping to crack the code for all future evasion lines. Fournier's stunning order to Graham and Davies was delivered by Lefebvre. "The extraction is still on for the other crew. You will hijack it." The audacity was breathtaking. They were not to wait for their own rescue. They were to insert themselves into an operation meant for others, using the confusion of Voss's chase to their advantage. The extraction point was a remote marshland 150 miles to the east, near the Belgian border. To get there, they needed to utilize the most brazen form of camouflage, German identity. Lefebvre provided them with impeccably forged papers, not civilian, but military. They were to travel by train, dressed in the uniforms of Belgian railway maintenance workers, requisitioned for German service. An incredibly high-risk disguise, yet one that offered the only chance of crossing hundreds of miles of occupied territory swiftly. As Graham donned the coarse dark blue uniform, the symbolism was powerful. He was trading the high-tech armor of the RAF for the terrifying low-tech camouflage of a forced collaborator. Their lives now depended on their ability to mimic the posture, walk and indifference of a man living under occupation. The strategic shift was complete. They were moving from simply surviving the descent to executing a controlled infiltration toward a high-stakes, pre-scheduled Allied extraction point. The technological arms race of the air war had distilled itself down to the single, chilling reality of a counterfeit uniform and the iron nerve of two men walking straight into the heart of the Reich's operational matrix. The journey by train was a crucible of psychological tension. Moving through occupied France and toward the Belgian border, the airmen, now disguised as forced laborers, had to navigate the most dangerous battlefield of all, the daily mundane scrutiny of the German state. The environment was a masterclass in technological control. German railway traffic was managed with military precision. Checkpoints were frequent, staffed by bored but observant military police. The airmen's survival depended not on speed, but on the meticulous accuracy of Lefebvre's forged documents, which detailed their essential work in maintaining the railway lines, a perfect low-status cover that usually drew little attention. Graham, ever the detail man, noted the technological landscape. German field phones hummed with constant chatter. Every major station was equipped with enormous powerful radio masts, constantly transmitting and receiving signals, the very communication network that Colonel Voss was using to track the phantom signal near Dieppe. The irony was acute. The vast modern communication system, designed to control Europe, was being outwitted by a small resistance cell and a teenage boy with a 10-second transmission limit. The human ingenuity of the resistance had neutralized the technological superiority of the Reich. During a long stopover near a vast German armory in Charleroi, Belgium, Davies spotted the ultimate danger. Colonel Dieter Voss was at the station platform, flanked by two highly trained Abwehr officers. Voss was not in pursuit, he was waiting. Fournier's intelligence had been flawless. Voss had realized the Dieppe signal was a decoy. The transmission was too clean, too easily triangulated, indicating it was intended to be found. Voss, the master analyst, understood that a genuine escape signal would be desperate, weak, and constantly moving. Voss had immediately reversed course, leveraging his own resources to analyze the pattern of resistance communication. He wasn't looking for the evaders. He was hunting the source of the communications and their ultimate destination. He had deduced that the next logical target for an Allied extraction, given the air routes, was the Belgian marshlands. He was ahead of the game, setting the ambush not for Graham and Davies, but for the incoming Allied rescue team. Graham and Davies, trapped in their maintenance compartment, realized the terrifying implication. They were walking into a double trap. Voss was expecting a small two-man rescue team to land by moonlight to pick up the original downed crew. The strategic element now hinged on speed of communication. They had to warn Fournier and the resistance of Voss's presence, but they had no way to transmit. Their survival now depended on their ability to use the cover of the enemy's own infrastructure. Using a piece of chalk, Davies, the flight engineer, scribbled a crude coded message onto the inside of the door of their railway car, a message meant for any resistance member who might later inspect the train car after it had passed through the next station. The code was simple, known only to Fournier's cell: the date and time of Voss's sighting, followed by the code word ECHO, meaning ambush confirmed. As they neared the designated extraction zone, a bleak, wind-swept marshland bordering a large, shallow lake, the train slowed to a crawl. They knew the next station was their last chance. They leaped from the train just before the station, disappearing into the thick pine forests bordering the tracks. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of peat. They were miles from civilization, but they were also perilously close to the German ambush position. Graham found the prearranged signal marker, a simple broken branch placed at a specific angle, confirming this was the primary extraction zone. They had reached the point of no return. The next few hours were spent scouting the perimeter. The marsh was treacherous, designed by nature to break an ankle. Then Davies spotted them, the glint of steel and the muffled sound of radio chatter. Voss's men were dug in, camouflaged perfectly in the reeds, surrounding the only feasible landing zone, a small flat field near the lake's edge. Voss was waiting for the technological lifeline, the arrival of the RAF Lysander aircraft, the famous high-winged stealth plane used for agent drops and retrievals. This plane, a slow, low-altitude marvel of engineering, was specifically designed for short field landings in occupied territory. Graham looked at Davies. They were two men, lightly armed, facing a platoon of hardened Abwehr officers, and a technological terror was due to arrive in the darkest hour before dawn. They could wait, but the original crew would be captured, and the Lysander crew would be ambushed. The stunning order had brought them here. Now the final act of resistance required a new, spontaneous order. They had to create a distraction so chaotic, so immediate, that they could scatter Voss's unit, abort the landing, and disappear into the night. Their technological expertise was about to be used not for flying, but for explosive ground-level sabotage. The clock was their enemy. They had less than 3 hours before the moon dipped low enough for the Lysander to attempt its highly secret landing. Their plan required leveraging the only technological assets they had, their knowledge of explosives and the local environment. When a downed airman was given his escape kit, it often included small, highly concentrated blocks of plastic explosive, intended for destroying radio equipment or aircraft parts. Davies had retrieved one such block from his uniform kit before ditching it. The marshland itself offered the perfect setting for their improvised sabotage. It was filled with old disused drainage ditches and crumbling culverts built during the First World War. "We need noise, Davies," Graham whispered, observing the German positions. "Not a gunshot. We need a catastrophe, something that screams reconnaissance detected." They spent the next hour moving like ghosts through the cold, wet reeds, utilizing the skills learned in evasive training. Davies, the engineer, located a large, strategically critical drainage culvert, a stone archway designed to prevent the marsh from flooding the railway lines, now just a few hundred yards from the German ambush position. Their target was the German field communications link. Voss's men were relying on a field telephone wire running between their observation post and a remote command truck. Cutting the wire was not enough. They needed to destroy the communication point itself. Davies carefully armed the plastic explosive. The detonation required a timer or a simple, slow-burning fuse. He used an improvised fuse, a small strip of material cut from the Lysander pilot's survival map, soaked in oil from a nearby abandoned farm vehicle, designed to burn slowly before reaching the detonator cap. This was low-tech brilliance, born of desperation and the necessity of wartime improvisation. The objective was not to kill, but to create such extreme confusion that the German soldiers would break formation and abandon the ambush site, giving the Lysander pilot a clear warning. The fuse was lit. They retreated, crawling into the thickest part of the peat bog, waiting for the blast that would decide the fate of 3 RAF crews. The explosion, when it came, was terrifyingly effective. It was not a huge aerial flash, but a deep, earth-shaking rumble, amplified by the confined space of the stone culvert. The charge blew the culvert apart, throwing up a massive, dense curtain of mud, water, and shattered stone. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The field telephone line went dead, and the sound echoed across the silent marsh, sounding exactly like a coordinated demolition. Chaos erupted in the German lines. The Abwehr officers, expecting an aircraft, instantly assumed they had been discovered by a British infiltration unit or a highly motivated local resistance cell. The training took over: scatter, secure the perimeter, and hunt the aggressor. As the German soldiers broke cover, their perfect ambush formation dissolved into panicked confusion. They began firing flares into the sky, not a signal to an aircraft, but an alert to their own ground units. This moment of psychological victory was almost instantly countered by a fresh technological threat. A distant sound grew into a low, throbbing menace, the unique, muffled engine note of the Lysander, approaching rapidly, having been given the all-clear based on the original intelligence. The pilot, Flight Lieutenant Hugh Sterling, was utterly unaware of the chaos below. Graham knew they had to abort the landing now. He grabbed his signal lamp, another piece of kit designed for Morse code communication. He pointed it toward the direction of the approaching plane and began frantically flashing the code for "Abort! Abort! Landing zone compromised." The German flares were burning brightly, confusing the pilot. The Lysander was low, its wheels nearly touching the reeds. Davies, making a decision based purely on engineering necessity, took the ultimate risk. He knew the Lysander had to abort immediately. He grabbed a small metal canister, an empty rations tin, and threw it directly into the nearest German flare, causing a blinding, localized flash and a puff of acrid smoke, drawing the attention of both the Germans and, crucially, the pilot. The Lysander pilot saw the sudden, anomalous flash near the ground, combined with the frantic Morse code signal. He trusted the technology of the signal lamp, the code of his training. The Lysander's engine roared as the pilot immediately executed a snap pull-up, a risky, sudden maneuver designed to escape low-altitude detection. He flew off, narrowly missing the rising trajectories of German rifle fire. The extraction was aborted. The original crew was saved from capture, and the Lysander pilot was saved from a cold ambush. Graham and Davies had achieved their objective. They denied Voss his prey and disrupted his strategic play. They vanished back into the swamp, the echo of the engine fading into the dawn. They were safe, but they were exhausted, alone, and still deep within occupied territory. The stunning order had led them into a tactical firefight, and now the path ahead was completely uncharted. The aftermath of the marshland explosion was total German confusion. Colonel Voss, a man whose reputation rested on clinical analysis, was enraged. He realized the explosion was a deliberate diversion, a perfectly executed piece of counter-sabotage. His strategic ambush had been thwarted by what he would later describe in official reports as a highly organized, professionally trained terror unit. Voss's immediate priority shifted from capture to denial. He ordered a massive sweep, utilizing dogs, vehicles, and hundreds of Wehrmacht troops. But Graham and Davies were long gone, swallowed by the intricate local knowledge provided by the resistance. The final phase of the stunning order was now put into effect by Captain Fournier. The success of the Lysander's escape meant the resistance had bought them a window of approximately 48 hours before the massive sweep made the entire region impassable. Fournier, having received the coded confirmation of the echo signal, realized the depth of the airmen's sacrifice. They had sacrificed their own rescue to save the mission. Now the network owed them everything. Their ultimate extraction was the most technologically complex and strategically audacious move of the entire operation. It did not involve a covert landing, but a coastal pickup by a specialized Royal Navy motor torpedo boat, MTB, operating from the English Channel, an incredibly dangerous maneuver known only as the Moonlight Run. The rendezvous point was a secluded beach in the Côte d'Opale, miles away from the marsh and any major German naval patrols. To reach it, they were passed through the final hands of the network, a kindly elderly fisherman whose small, seemingly innocuous boat was equipped with a secret compartment and a radio transmitter, small enough to fit inside a jam jar. The fisherman, whose code name was the Lighthouse, brought them to the desolate beach under a cold, starless night. As they waited, shivering in the damp sand, Graham paused, reflecting on the journey. He had been a navigator relying on complex celestial calculations and multi-million-pound machinery. His survival, however, had relied on the selfless heroism of Edith Marceau, the cunning strategy of Fournier, the courage of the young Jean, and the simple integrity of an improvised explosive device. The technological irony of the war was complete. The massive industrial might of the Third Reich had been defeated by a handful of brave civilians armed with little more than silence, paper, and localized knowledge. The sound of the MTB was barely a whisper against the waves, a low, powerful rumble of twin engines, muffled by specialized acoustic dampening technology. It arrived at the designated time, its dark silhouette blending perfectly with the choppy sea. As Graham and Davies climbed aboard, Stepping from the damp sand of occupied Europe onto the hard deck of an Allied naval vessel, the fisherman gave them a final solemn nod. "Tell the people back home," he said, his voice raw, "that France is not defeated. It is hidden." Hours later, the MTB docked in Dover. The two airmen were debriefed, their intelligence regarding Colonel Voss and the German radar shift deemed invaluable. Their spontaneous counter-sabotage in the marshlands had provided Allied intelligence with a crucial understanding of German counter-espionage tactics, which directly influenced the security protocols for the upcoming D-Day landings. Their story, however, was immediately classified. The incredible risk taken by Edith Marceau, Jean, Fournier, and all the nameless agents of the Pat line could not be revealed. Their safety depended on the continued silence. The legacy. The ultimate irony is that the two airmen who survived the fire of the sky and the cold darkness of the resistance swamp were never famous. Their mission, dictated by the stunning order of the resistance, became a phantom chapter of the war. They returned to duty, their experience transforming them from crew members into hardened veterans, aware that the true war was fought not just at 18,000 feet, but in the muddy silence of cellars, the whisper of passwords, and the terrifying decision of a single civilian. The story of the French civilian who risked everything, and the airmen who sacrificed their own rescue to execute a strategic counter-trap, reminds us that the vast, impersonal scale of World War II was always defined by individual, quiet courage. The technological spectacle of the conflict rested entirely on the frail, magnificent strength of the human heart. Colonel Voss never learned the identity of the resistance members who foiled him, but he understood the lesson. The greatest weakness of the technological war machine was its inability to account for pure, selfless human resolve. The ghost that Jean created and that Graham and Davies became was the ultimate strategic victory. The two pilots, Graham and Davies, finished their tours. They returned home, carrying not only the physical scars of their aerial combat, but the profound psychological debt owed to the people of Vaucresson, the true, silent heroes of the European conflict. The war is full of these untold stories, moments where ordinary people defied fate and risked everything. If you want to dive deeper into the tactics, technology, and sheer human drama of the Shadow War in occupied Europe, like this video and subscribe to the channel to ensure you don't miss our next chapter on World War II's most incredible secrets.